Hey everybody, I'm back in the bus today. The task for the last couple of days has been pulling up our flooring, and it's been a pretty tough job so far. My last bus that I had, our TC2000, the floor, the wood underneath it was so worn out and so soggy that you could actually just pull it up by handfuls. It didn't have any structural integrity at all. This one's proving to be a lot more difficult. Now there is a good amount of moisture in the wood, and in fact all of the fittings that are holding, all the screws that are holding the wood down to the metal, most of them are rusted either completely away or they're pretty rusty but still have a functional head on them. But even after removing the ones with the functional head on them, it's still been a pretty tough job. So I'm going to show you real quick what I'm doing to get the wood up and how this project is going so far. Alright, so first thing I'm going to show you is the progress that I've made so far. If you have been keeping up with our story, you'll see I got these back pieces out fairly quickly, but then it's taken me several days to get just this much done. And sorry, I haven't done any cleaning of the stuff that I've pulled up so far, but I've been pulling the rubber off of the wood, which it does have adhesive holding it on there, so that's been slower than I would have liked. And I'm separating it, putting the wood over here, which eventually we'll be able to get rid of. And see, the amount of rust we have is largely cosmetic, although I did find my first area where there's actually some missing metal. This is where the air conditioning hoses go in, and usually the air conditioners are where your condensation is coming from, so you would get a lot more moisture right around where the air conditioners are, and you would expect there to be more rust. And strangely, there's one little spot here where I can see through a crack, but it's not clear yet if that is caused by rust or what. Now, being in Florida and being the middle of September, it's still pretty darn hot here, and I brought my infrared thermometer, and if I aim it just at the floor, the temperature of the floor is 92 degrees. The air temperature outside today is supposed to only be 90, so that is a difference of temperature caused by the shell of the bus heating up and thermally conducting that heat through to the underside of the bus. Now if we look at the ceiling, do the same thing. My ceiling is 99 degrees or so where I'm aiming it. And if I go closer to the ribs, you'll see it goes well over 100 degrees. Now, there's a lot of people who talk about not taking their ceiling panels down, and I'll be the first one to say that the look of the inside of a bus where you've built it out and retained the metal ceiling can look really nice, but the amount of thermal conductivity that you get is just absurd. Having your ceiling connected physically to your roof, essentially you get all of the heat from the sun hitting the roof, or a large portion of that heat from the sun as it hits the roof, actually conducting down to your ceiling panel on the inside and radiating into the passenger area of the bus. I will tell you, I am not excited at the idea of pulling all of these rivets out. And actually, if you've seen some of my other videos, I do have one where I was using air tools to knock these rivets out with relative ease, but there are hundreds of these things, and even when it's only a little bit of effort per rivet, There are so many rivets. This is going to be a big, difficult job that I wish I could skip, but I honestly don't see that as being a viable option. The insulation that they put inside of the panel, you've got about 1 5/8 inches, almost 2 inches of space between the ceiling panel and the roof panel, and there's a little bit of fiberglass batting in there that really, as far as temperature goes, is providing you no insulation value at all, and if anything, it's giving you a little bit of sound deadening. So these panels are all going to be coming down, and I'll be putting rigid foam board insulation up along the underside of the roof, rather. And I hate to even try measuring the temperature of the roof, but for the sake of completeness, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So we're going to pop this hatch as soon as I figure out how you pop this hatch. So just turn to there and then push. There we go. Oh, the sun. Whew. And I'm just going to stick this thing up, and we'll pull the trigger for a few seconds, and I believe it holds the temperature. And I got 127 degrees on the roof right now in that spot that I randomly chose. And now I'm going to put this thing right back down. That is a ton of heat. I do have my fan. I've been out here for about 10 or 15 minutes at a time, a few days in a row, and I've got all the windows open. It just turns me into a sweaty, gross mess within just a few minutes. As you can see, you know, it's Thursday, or I guess it's Friday actually today, and my accomplishments since, I guess, Tuesday are this sheet, which is a 4x8 foot sheet that goes here, which I still have a little bit of left, and this strip here, and having pulled up the center rubber aisle and exposed the wood there. So alright, I'm going to get ready to start pulling up a piece of wood. Alright, so a couple of parts to this. First, we've got this rubber mat that's on top of the plywood. Now, it's got glue on the entirety of it, but it's got extra glue in a few spots. So there's a lot of areas where it's not that hard to pull up, and then there's some areas where it's really hard to pull up. So to turn it into a more manageable job, I like to cut it and turn it into strips that you can pull up. So I've got my safety knife here, and I can get through it in about 2 cuts. You have to put a little bit of pressure on it. So this blade is not going to last forever. This isn't a new blade either. But if we take the knife and we put one good cut down to the edge here, and then I'm going to come back, follow the same line as best as I can, and do it a second time. Didn't do it that well. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this away. We'll do a strip this wide. Alright, now in theory, I can pull this up. And we've got another edge here. One thing I've found is really helpful, I got this crowbar from Harbor Freight a couple of years ago, and this thing works really well for shoving up underneath the rubber. So you can see that way pretty well. guy up. And there's a strip. Now, probably can't see from there. So I'll bring the camera over. And we've got screws going through this. This one is fairly intact, so it should come up pretty easily. And they tend to be in a straight line, in a row, where they'll have one every so often. So you can kind of eyeball down and look for another one. It looks like there's one at the very end. There's probably another one all the way at the other far end. So let me get my impact together. Which I have here. Got a number 3 Phillips. And we can buzz this one right out. Now some of these, probably even half of them, you're not going to be able to take, or I'm not going to be able to take out with the impact because they're going to be so ate up and rusty. If you look at this edge over here, I'll demonstrate. I've got one here where the head is rusted very badly, and while it still looks like a screw head, there is no meat to grab on this thing. So there is no getting that out with a screw gun. I'm going to end up, I assume, I'm going to end up grinding this one off once I get to that step. And on here, there's another screw here. We'll see if I can get it. All right, now I've said it before in other videos. If you don't have a cordless 1/4-inch drive impact, you are really doing things the hard way. That would have taken a lot more effort and a lot more time to try and do otherwise. This has been one of, if not the most important tool that I've bought since starting school bus projects. So other things that I've picked up, went to Harbor Freight yesterday, picked up a 4-pound dead blow hammer. This is nice. It doesn't make as much noise as a regular hammer when you're smacking on things, and should last a good long time. Doesn't hurt your hand when you hit something with it, like, you know, you hit something hard with a regular hammer and it kind of resonates through it into your hand. You don't get that with this. I also picked up, while I was there yesterday, a circular saw, which is a fairly cheap model, and started using that with the depth adjusted down to about 3/4 of an inch to try cutting lines through the plywood. And while that worked, I also tried doing it with my reciprocating saw, doing the same kind of thing, and found that was actually doing the job a lot easier. So I've got, and this uses the same battery as my drill and my cordless impact. I've got the Bosch reciprocating saw. I've got a big old blade on it made for wood, and I'm just kind of going at an angle with it to go through this plywood. So that's going to be the next thing that we do. Alright, now the big thing I'm working against here is I'm trying not to deal with these sheets at their full size, because there's so many spots where there are fasteners that have gone through them that give you enough resistance that you won't be able to really move it. So cutting this into, this will be probably 3 pieces on the narrow side for this, allows me to deal with much smaller pieces and get it out a lot easier, even though it seems like it's a lot more work since I'm having to cut it, but the actual amount of effort that goes into doing it Like I said, I spent 4 days on getting most of that piece done, and it's still not all the way out. So I can take this guy and do it at an angle so that in theory, I'm avoiding hitting the metal underneath, going most of the way through the wood so that I'll be able to bust it out with my crowbar in a minute. So let's give this a run. Move this cord out of the way. Now these reciprocating saws with these big old demolition blades on them, they are serious about the way they cut. So you can move fairly quickly, quicker than you would think. A little narrow there. All right, and then we'll go get the sideways cut here. Same thing. And I definitely was not trying to get all the way down to the metal. For the most part, I should be able to rip it up with the pry bar. So we're gonna just give it a quick test here. Yeah, this one's gonna come right up. Shouldn't do this in flip-flops, in case that wasn't obvious. Now it looks like I've got maybe another screw down here. This is one of the fasteners that you'll be fighting with, trying to get this out. And if you look at the one on the other side here, this is just like a nail. And I do not see any sort of threading on this side. So we'll just try and pry from over here, see if we can get that loose. Get the crow's foot in there, and we're gonna pry. I'm getting a little bit more up than I had bargained for. But I got it off of that fastener. I just have the wood actually holding it together over here. So I'll give it another touch with the saw. Get a little bit deeper. Alright, now of course every bus is going to be a little bit different. It's unlikely your bus is going to be exactly like this. It's kind of interesting to me how different bus floors are. Some of them don't have the metal pan underneath. Some of them don't have wood underneath the rubber. Some of them just have rubber directly on the metal. But most of them will have something pretty close to this. There may not be all the screws going through. There might be nails going through instead. There might be nothing going through. It could be fully floating. I've seen pretty much every combination you can think of. But hopefully this video helps you with your bus, getting your floor out, and ways to make the job a little bit easier. And we'll see you in the next one. I'm just going to show one more thing real quick at the end here. The little bit of cutting that you saw me do with the reciprocating saw has eaten the entirety of the battery. So as great as that saw is, it burns through the electricity. If you've got a corded one, you won't have that problem, but if you're using a cordless reciprocating saw, you're spending a lot of time charging batteries, which, as you can see by how sweaty I am already, you'll be appreciative of those breaks. Alright, thanks everybody.